Part 26 of my figure gaming hobby series of videos will be covering storage systems for figures, in this case specifically Napoleonic or ancient 15mm figures. The same principles can be used for other types and sizes of figures. I've previously covered how to make storage boxes, part 3 of the figure gaming hobby series of videos, called part 3 Micro Armor Figure Gaming Hobby Micro Armor Storage Systems, goes into a great deal of difficulty or detail in terms of how to make storage boxes, but nonetheless, if you don't wish to go back to view part 3 of the series, I will briefly cover how to make a storage box here. However, if you want to know all the details, I strongly advise you to go back to part 3. I currently use 3 sizes of storage boxes, A4, A3 and a strange middle size, which I will not cover in this video. Incidentally, I'm only using document storage boxes. There are other kinds of boxes you can use as well, and the same principles should apply to those sort of boxes. A3 document size boxes allow you to store a lot of figures, but they are surprisingly hard to transport. I use A3 box for storage of figures I do not use very much. So if you have a large number of seldom used figures, it may be a solution. However, the most useful size is A4 boxes. They are small, easy to transport, and normally carry almost enough figures for a game. While not specifically related to how to make storage boxes, one advice I can provide is that when you decide to have a game, pre-packing the figures before the game starts and the figures you intend to use for the game is a good idea. This allows you to set up a game much quicker and also pack up a game much quicker than the alternative, which is sorting through several boxes and trays for the figures you need for the game. This is the main reason why an A4 box is ideal. However, as we will soon discover, particularly for 15mm, you still may need at least 2 A4 boxes for your force mix. This is mainly due to the height of your figures. In simple terms, the storage solution I use is basically creating a wooden tray to place inside your A4 document box. The base will be MDF and the sides will be 0.8mm thick pine or oak pre-cut timber. Unless you are a master craftsman, my advice is to always allow for significant margin of errors. Just a note, gift boxes often found in news agencies can also be suitable storage boxes. This is an example, a building diagram which I use. The external length of the A4 box is 31.7 centimeters, but you'll notice the internal size of the tray is 31 centimeters. A similar margin of error applies to the width. I've never found any issues with these measurements, but if you're a master craftsman, then you can try and increase the size so it fits snugly into the box. However, I'm not quite sure why you'd want to do this because it doesn't normally allow you to store any more figures. The next area to consider is the height of the tray and how many trays you can fit into the document box. I use 2 configurations, a single tray, which is a full 7 centimeter height, and a 2-tray solution with one tray 3.5 centimeters and the other 4 centimeters. One note about height, each tray base is 3mm thick, and the felt I place on top of the box lids is a further 2mm thick. Thus, the wooden sizes are respectively 6.5 centimeters high for the single tray solution and 3 centimeters high and 3.5 centimeter high for the true 2-tray solution. The 2-tray solution fits snugly about the lip of the box, perhaps within 2mm of it, and this is possibly the ideal size. The 6.5 centimeter solution does sort of reside about 5mm below the lid of the box, which is not really an issue. The main reason why this occurs is because I can't find wood which is 7 centimeters high. I have to do with 6.5. The 6.5 centimeter high single tray box can fit almost any height figure. I normally use these for ancients such as elephants, which are possibly the most difficult figures to store, and pikemen. But I do find myself using them for cavalry, especially if the cavalry have flags, swords in the air, and possess tall hats, particularly an issue in the Napoleonic period. You can see this is the case. In this case, there is a small lip at the top of the tray, again about 5mm. If you can find wood which is 7cm wide, then the tray would fit perfectly into the document box, but I'm unable to find this size pre-cut timber. I also place a moisture absorbent material in the box. You will see on the right at the top one element has two figures missing. These figures dissolved during my storing of the figures. I must admit they had been stored for over 20 years and I had not seen them in the interim. I'm guessing a moisture got into my old storage solution, which did not use felt and did not use moisture absorbent material, and as a result I now very carefully store these things in a dry, cool location, and also is one reason why I use felt and moisture absorbent material in the box. The more modern produced 15mm figures are closer to 18mm. So this height, which is 6.5cm, is required for a lot of modern high quality figures. A A4 box can easily accommodate up to 36 elements of cavalry, which with a base size of 4cm wide and 3cm deep. This is large enough for a game of DBN, but for most other rules you probably would be aiming for 50 elements at least. If the infantry use 2cm wide or deep bases, you could store 10 elements in each slot. Thus, if you had 30 infantry elements, these would occupy 3 slots, leaving you enough room for 18 cavalry and or artillery elements. This may just accommodate a force mix for most other rules. I do not at the present moment have a 3cm/3.5cm configuration using standard A4 boxes. Instead, I basically use this configuration for my rather unusually sized boxes which I got from the US. I have no idea what the size of these boxes were meant to aim for, maybe foolscap, I'm not quite sure. It allows me to place 2 trays in a single box. Incidentally, the depth of this box is identical to a standard A4 box, so the depth is identical. I find the 3cm height trays can accommodate most infantry and artillery, with 3.5cm trays being reserved for cavalry and troops with flags. If a figure is too high, it can be placed on its side, as long as the base depth is no more than 3cm. Thus, you probably could not place elephants in this kind of box, but considering my force mix here is Prussian, the Prussians did not field many elephants, and as a result it's not an issue, but it certainly is an issue for ancients. This shows the side of the box. The timber I use is 0.8mm thick, although I still use a 1.2mm thick timber for my A3 boxes, for a variety of reasons which I won't go into. Inside each box are placed 3mm MDF dividers, which are normally 1cm lower than the box sides. If they are too low, you cannot grab anything to pull the tray out. If they are too high, it's difficult to get figures out. This shows a top-down view of the same box. After building many boxes, I've arrived at the following optimal formula. If the bases are 4cm thick, then measure 5cm increments along the side pieces. This represents the outer edge of the internal MDF divider. Measure back 3mm, and that is what you need to saw out to allow the dividers to fit snugly. For a more detailed overview of this process, view my earlier Part 3 video. The first question you may ask is, why create slots 7mm wider than the bases? The answer is felt is normally 2mm thick, so will occupy 4mm of the gap, and the rest is margin of error. If you are a master craftsman, you can reduce this gap by 3mm. And I have made many boxes like this, but I've also made errors making those boxes useless. So as a result, now I go for the bigger margin of error, and I have no problems. As indicated, unless you're a master craftsman, always allow adequate margin of error, because there's nothing more upsetting than putting a lot of effort into creating a tray and then discovering that the elements don't fit in there correctly. If the bases or elements are 3cm wide, this shows a possible configuration. As you can see, you can store more figures, but surprisingly not much more. However, if I was to go down the path of 3cm wide bases for my 10mm or 6mm, these boxes in a true two-tray configuration would be perfect in all ways. Just a note, I still allow the 1 centimetre greater than the element base. So if they're 3 centimetre wide, then you measure out 4 centimetre increments, move back 3 mil, which is the cut that you need to put in the side, and then the felt occupies another 4 mil, which leaves you 3 mil of margin of error, which I can assure you, you will need. With our one tray solution, we could store up to 48 elements, but probably more practically 40 elements. This is short of the optimal 50 elements per side that most rules would probably require. But if your force mix is high quality troops, then this would be more than adequate because obviously you field less elements. The advantage of this solution or box is figure height is not an issue at all. With our 2-tray solution, you could store up to 96 elements, but more practically 80 elements. This is more than enough for a Napoleonics or Ancients game. However, some figure heights may pose an problem. Elephants are actually the major issue. If you're not fielding elephants, then anything that's too high, you can probably place in the box on its side. The conclusion is you will often bring 2 boxes along with you. This will cover your height and storage issue comfortably. My rather odd-shaped boxes, which are slightly larger, are more than adequate, except for the height, very high elements. But with my rather odd-shaped boxes, with 1-tray solution, I can actually field 48 elements easily without any particular issue. However, once I bought a whole bunch of these boxes, I'm unable to find a source of them again, and I suspect other players may find them rather difficult to find, so that's the reason why I'm not covering that particular size. If I went down the A3 path, the optimal configuration is 2 trays, one 4 centimetre high and the other 5 centimetre high. This can store a lot of figures, 15 elements of infantry or 10 elements of cavalry in each slot. This allows you to store 60 infantry elements and 40 cavalry elements per tray, and the same in the other tray. An impressive 200 elements can be accommodated, and while the height will require you to place some elements on their sides, all heights can be accommodated in this box. This shows one of my A3 boxes containing Napoleonics, and while an attractive solution, I find the box is rather difficult to transport. If I possessed a 25mm force mix and used a single tray, then it probably would be quite suitable, but for 15mm it's too heavy and contains too many figures, making setting up a game more difficult than it otherwise should be. But nonetheless, it's certainly something players can consider if they don't want to have lots of A4 boxes. Now for a quick run through of how to make these boxes. Know that a more detailed version can be found in part 3. The base is made of 3mm MDF board. I normally use a jigsaw to cut the MDF due to the large size of the board that I purchased from the hardware shop, but it's possible to use a handsaw regardless. The sides of the box are 8mm thick pine rake. Most hardware stores provide a range of different sizes. In this case I'm using a 6.5cm wide or thick board. They come in 1.2 or 2.4 metre sizes. 1.2 metre allows you to create a single box. The wood is cut with a handsaw. I also use a handsaw to cut the grooves, which you can see drawn here. You only need to cut a line 2 to 3mm deep in the side pieces of timber, then move it to one side and cut another 2 to 3mm deep. Then use the saw to clear out the wood in between. A thin file can assist in smoothing out the slots. I use hardware quality outdoor PVC glue. I suppose hobby glue may work, but this type of glue is thick, takes a while to dry, and gives you a very good bond. This shows the baseboard with the glue placed around the edges. Place each piece of wood on the baseboard and press until you get a reasonable bond. The outdoor quality PVC glue, if you press hard enough, will actually stick reasonably well. Then place the next piece on until the entire box is formed. Now just a note, when you do it this way, it will not be perfectly aligned. We need to ensure that all the pieces are perfectly aligned, and we'll see how to do that in the next slide. This is the tricky part. Place the tray on a book which is covered with contact plastic. PVA or PVC does not stick to plastic. It's pretty important that when you dry this thing that it's placed on a surface which will not stick to it. because the glue will ooze out. Also run your finger along it because you don't want lumps of glue sticking out the side. That becomes very difficult to remove when it's fully dry. Then place another book on top of it and align all the wood sides until they are centered and flush with each other. I normally do one end, spin the arrangement around, and then do the same to the other end. Then repeat the process a few more times until I'm happy that everything is centered, that is, the wood is centered on the baseboard, and aligned, that is, the side pieces are flush with the ends of the other side pieces. The dividers are basically your 3mm MDF board cut with a handsaw. Make sure they fit in the slots, but not too tight. If too tight, the dividers may bend. Glue into the slots and press down with some books for 12 to 24 hours. I also fill the gaps above the dividers with wood putty. The main objective here is to ensure the dividers do not slide out of the slots when you lift the box using the dividers. The wood putty helps, but is not really necessary if you adequately place enough glue on the dividers. Next step is paint. I use 2 coats. This is the undercoat. Just a quick note, the top part of the tray will be eventually covered with felt. You could decide not to bother painting that, but for reasons I tend to paint the whole thing. The bottom of the box, which you can see here, and the sides will be visible, so it's probably a good idea to paint it a nice colour. Once the paint is dry, I bring it in and then glue, using hobby glue in this case, felt into the box. This is not necessary, but I think it looks good, protects your valuable figures, and the felt grabs the bases so the figures don't fly around in the box if being transported. I also place felt on the sides using the overrun of felt that you see at the top of this image. The result is a felt-covered storage box which can keep your figures safe and dry, while being in a cardboard box which allows you to store them in your home. Just don't tell your wife what's in them. So we come to the end of my part 26, Players' Ideas video series, which in this case is storing your 15mm ancient and Napoleonic figures. Denken Sie daran, immer verhält Heimatland zu Köpfen.